Greg Porter looked out the large window of his office on the Galactic Consular Station. The stars seemed different here, so far from Earth. He had been the human ambassador to the Galactic Consular for 3 years now. Some days he still couldn't believe they had chosen him for this job. Greg was not from a wealthy family. He grew up in a small town in Ohio, studied hard, and joined the diplomatic service because he wanted to make a difference. When humans first made contact with alien life 20 years ago, Greg had just finished college. He watched the news with wonder as the Viridi ships entered Earth's orbit. Now he worked with the Viridi and 15 other alien species every day. The Galactic Consular had kept peace between the stars for over 200 years. Humans were the newest members, having joined only 5 years ago. Many aliens still viewed humans with suspicion. Humans were seen as too emotional, too unpredictable. Greg worked hard to change this view. His desk computer beeped. It was a message from Carol, his assistant. "Sir, the Krull ambassador is asking for an urgent meeting." Greg frowned. The Krull were one of the oldest members of the consular. They were tall, with rough gray skin and 4 arms. They were also one of the species most opposed to human membership. Several human colonies were near Krull space, and there had been disputes over who owned certain planets. "Tell him I'll meet him in 30 minutes, Greg replied. He used this time to review recent reports about Krull-human relations. There had been no major incidents in the past month. So why the urgent meeting? Greg walked down the curved hallway of the station. The artificial gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth's. The air smelled faintly of the special plants that produced oxygen for the many different species on board. He nodded politely to a group of Moravi delegates, their blue tentacles rippling in greeting. The meeting room was small and plain. Ambassador Skatol was already waiting. Krull did not believe in sitting during official meetings, so they both stood at a small table. "Ambassador Porter," Skatol said. His voice translator made his words sound flat. "I wish to discuss the military ship your people have sent to the Proxima system." Greg kept his face calm, though he was surprised. "I'm not aware of any human military ships in that area." "Do not lie," Skatol said. His upper arms crossed, a sign of anger in Krull body language. "We have detected a human vessel near the outer planet. This is Krull territory. The Proxima system is in disputed space," Greg corrected gently. "Neither Krull nor humans have exclusive rights there under consular law. The consular has not yet ruled on the matter," Skatol said. "Until then, your ships should stay away." Greg nodded slowly. "I will contact Earth and ask about this ship. But I assure you, we have no interest in creating tension." "See that you don't," Skatol said. "The patience of the Krull has limits." After the Krull ambassador left, Greg immediately called his security advisor, Frank Wilson. "Frank, check if we have any ships near Proxima. The Krull are making accusations." Frank's face looked worried on the screen. "According to our records, we have no military vessels anywhere near there. The closest is the science ship Dakota, but it's 4 light years away." Greg rubbed his forehead. Something doesn't add up. Either the Krull are seeing things that aren't there, or someone wants to create trouble. Frank finished. Greg looked back at the stars. Peace between the species was fragile. Humans were still proving themselves worthy of being in the consular. One wrong move could undo years of careful diplomacy. "Keep this quiet for now," Greg told Frank. "I'll speak to Director Zyktar tomorrow and try to clear this up." As he ended the call, Greg didn't know that this small incident was just the beginning. In 2 days, the peace that had lasted for centuries would start to crumble, and he would find himself at the center of a crisis that would change the galaxy forever. 2 days after meeting with the Krull ambassador, Greg was woken by the urgent beeping of his communication device. It was 3 a.m. station time. His heart raced as he answered. "Ambassador Porter, you need to come to the emergency chamber now," said Carol, her voice shaking. "There's been an incident." Greg dressed quickly. The station corridors were unusually busy for this hour. Aliens from various species hurried past him, some giving him cold looks, A group of Moravi diplomats turned away when they saw him approaching. Something was very wrong. When Greg entered the emergency chamber, all eyes turned to him. Representatives from all 17 species were gathered around the large oval table. Director Zyktar, the tall Viridi who led the consular, stood at the head of the table. His green scales seemed dull under the harsh lighting. Ambassador Porter, Zyktar said. His voice was formal and cold. We have called this emergency session because of a serious violation of consular peace. Greg took his seat, noticing that the other human staff members looked pale and worried. What has happened, Director? Instead of answering, Zyktar nodded to the Kral ambassador. Sktul stepped forward and pressed a button on the table. A large screen on the wall lit up, showing video footage from space. 6 hours ago, a human military vessel entered the Proxima system. Sktul said. It approached a Kral civilian transport ship without warning. The video showed a sleek ship moving toward a larger, bulkier vessel. Greg could see human markings on the smaller ship. That's impossible, Greg said. We have no ships in that area. Sktul ignored him and continued. The human ship then opened fire on our transport. The video showed bright flashes as the smaller ship fired on the larger one. Explosions bloomed in the silent darkness of space. Greg felt sick as he watched. The transport ship broke apart, debris floating in all directions. 37 Kral civilians were killed, Sktul said. His voice was angry but controlled. This is an act of war. The chamber erupted in loud voices. Many representatives were shouting for human removal from the consular. Some called for immediate sanctions. Greg stood up, raising his hands. Please, this must be a mistake. Earth has not authorized any military action. The ship in that video cannot be ours. Director Zyktar banged a ceremonial staff on the floor, calling for order. Ambassador Porter, the evidence is clear. The ship has human markings and weapons signatures that match your technology. I need to contact Earth immediately, Greg insisted. This doesn't make sense. The Viridi director nodded. You have 48 hours to consult with your government and provide an explanation. Until then, all human movement on the station will be restricted and your communication will be monitored. As Greg left the chamber, Carol hurried to his side. Sir, we've been trying to contact Earth since we heard the news, but there's something wrong with our communications. We can only send basic messages. What about our security feeds from the border regions? Greg asked. Do we have any record of this ship? No, sir, said Frank, joining them. According to all our data, no human military vessel has been anywhere near Proxima in the past month. Back in his office, Greg and his team worked frantically to understand what had happened. Carol finally managed to get a poor connection to Earth's Space Command. Admiral Henry's face appeared on the screen, breaking up with static. Porter, no ships, authorized, in Proxima. The vessel, not in our registry. Someone is setting us up, Greg said to his team after the call ended. But who? And why? Frank looked grim. The Kral have wanted humans out of the consular since we joined. This could be their way of forcing us out. Greg stared at the stars through his window. In just 2 days, everything had changed. The peace was breaking and humanity was being blamed. He had 48 hours to discover the truth before the galaxy turned against Earth completely. Greg gathered his small team in his office. They had less than 40 hours left to find the truth. Carol brought coffee for everyone as they crowded around the desk. Besides her and Frank, there was Dr. Ellie Ward, their science advisor, and Peter Jones, their cultural specialist. We need to look at that video again, Greg said. Something doesn't feel right about it. Frank nodded and played the footage on the office screen. They watched in silence as the supposed human ship attacked the Kral transport. Can we slow it down? Asked Ellie, leaning forward. Frank adjusted the controls, and the video played at quarter speed. There, Ellie said, pointing. Look at the way the ship fires. The light pattern is wrong for human weapons. Greg squinted at the screen. What do you mean? Human plasma cannons have a blue-white signature, Ellie explained. These are more green-yellow, and the firing pattern is too regular. Our weapons have a slight delay between shots. So someone copied our ships but got the weapons wrong? Peter asked. It seems that way, Ellie said. It's a good copy, but not perfect. We need more proof, Greg said. This observation alone won't convince the consular. Carol, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. Sir, I've been trying to access the station's sensor logs. I want to see if they recorded the attack from a different angle. And? Greg asked. I can't get in. My access has been blocked, Carol said. That's never happened before. Frank frowned. Mine too. I just tried. Someone doesn't want us looking too closely, Greg said. I'm going to try something. I still have high-level access as an ambassador. Greg used his personal codes to search the station's communication logs. Look at this. 3 days ago, there was an unusual amount of encrypted traffic between the station and crawl ships. Right before the attack, Peter noted. And here's something else, Greg continued. The crawl had been moving military ships to positions near human colonies for the past 2 weeks. They were preparing, Frank said grimly. This wasn't a sudden response to an attack. They planned this. A soft knock interrupted them. Greg opened the door to find a young Verity standing there. He recognized her as one of Director Ziktar's assistants. Ambassador Porter, she whispered, looking nervous. I need to speak with you, alone. Greg led her inside and closed the door. This is my team. You can speak freely. The Verivi's scales shimmered with anxiety. My name is Sile. I work in the communications center. I've seen things, heard things that don't make sense. About the attack? Greg asked. Sile nodded. 3 days ago, Director Ziktar had a private meeting with the Crawl ambassador. Afterwards, he ordered us to modify the station's sensor settings in the Proxima sector. Modify how? Ellie asked. To ignore certain energy signatures, Sile said. And then yesterday I was ordered to delete parts of the sensor logs from the time of the attack. I made a copy before I deleted them. She handed Greg a small data chip. Why are you telling us this? Greg asked. You're risking a lot. Sile's eyes showed fear. My family lives on a mixed colony near human space. If there's a war, they would be in danger. And the consular is supposed to stand for truth and justice. This feels wrong. After Sile left, Frank examined the data chip carefully for traps before inserting it into their secure system. She's right, Frank said as he reviewed the data. The original sensor logs show 2 ships in the area during the attack. The one that fired on the transport, and another ship that stayed just out of visual range. A controller ship, Ellie suggested, maybe remote piloting the fake human vessel. Greg felt a cold anger growing inside him. So the Crawl staged this attack, and the consular leadership helped cover it up. But why would Director Ziktar help them? Carol asked. That's what we need to find out next, Greg said. And we need to get this evidence to Earth before the Crawl make their next move. Greg and his team worked through the night. Their time was running out. In just 20 hours, they would have to face the consular again. The station felt different now. The usual friendly atmosphere was gone. Human staff reported cold stares and harsh words from other species. We need to get this evidence to Earth, Greg said, holding up the data chip Sile had given them. But our communications are being washed. I might have a way, Peter said. The Gandari merchant ship that docked yesterday. Their captain owes me a favor. Too risky, Frank argued. The Crawl will be watching all ships leaving the station. What about the emergency beacon system? Ellie suggested. It's designed to work even if normal communications fail. Carol typed quickly on her console. I can access it, but they'll know immediately if we use it. Greg made a decision. Send the evidence to Earth through the emergency system. Then we go directly to Director Ziktar with what we know. That's dangerous, Frank warned. He's involved in this. Exactly, Greg said. I want to see his reaction when confronted. We might learn more. Carol sent the data to Earth using the emergency beacon. Almost immediately, alarms began to sound throughout the station. They detected it, she said. We should hurry. Greg led his team through the corridors toward the director's office. They passed groups of security officers running toward the human section. When they reached the director's office, they found it empty. A voice came from behind them. Ambassador Porter, you've been busy. They turned to see Director Zyktar standing in the doorway, flanked by 4 Crawl security officers. We need to talk, Greg said calmly. We know about the second ship at the Proxima attack. We know the sensor logs were altered. For a moment, Zyktar's scales darkened with surprise, but he quickly recovered. Serious accusations, Ambassador. Do you have proof? We sent it to Earth, Frank said. The director's eyes narrowed. That explains the emergency beacon activation, a breach of station protocols during a crisis. The real breach is falsifying evidence to blame humans for an attack they didn't commit, Greg said. Why, Director? Why help the Crawl stage this? Instead of answering, Zyktar turned to the Crawl guards. Secure them. The consular will deal with this new development. As the guards moved forward, alarms began blaring again. A voice announced over the station speakers, Security alert. Unidentified vessels approaching the station. All personnel to emergency positions. Zyktar received a message on his personal device. His scales paled. It seems your Earth government has responded quickly, Ambassador. Those aren't our ships, Greg said, confused. Earth couldn't respond this fast. The director stepped aside. Go see for yourself. They rushed to the observation deck. Through the large windows, they could see several ships approaching the station. They were sleek and dark, with no identifying marks. Those aren't Earth ships, Frank confirmed, checking his device. Unknown design. A message came through on all communication channels. The voice was Crawl, but not like any Crawl they had heard before. Attention Galactic Consular Station. This is Admiral Vrek of the True Crawl Alliance. Your corruption ends today. The false peace you maintain benefits only the ruling classes. We claim this station in the name of all oppressed species. Greg turned to his team in shock. A Crawl rebel faction. That's who staged the attack. Peter nodded slowly. I've heard rumors about divisions within Crawl society. Some groups feel their leadership has become weak through cooperation with other species. Zyktar entered the observation deck, looking shaken. Ambassador Porter, it seems we both have been deceived. The Crawl ambassador has just confessed that elements within their military worked with these rebels. And you helped them by altering sensor data, Greg accused. I was told it was a necessary test of station security, Zyktar said defensively. I did not know about the attack plan. Before Greg could respond, the station shook violently. The rebels had opened fire. All this to start a war between humans and Crawl, Greg realized. While the consular was distracted, they could take control. We need to work together now, Zyktar said, or there won't be a consular left to save. The station shook again as more rebel ships attacked. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridors. People of all species ran to safety areas or to their assigned defense positions. We need to get to the command center, Zyktar said, leading the way. Greg and his team followed, along with the Crawl security officers who now seemed more concerned with the rebel attack than watching the humans. In the command center, screens showed the rebel ships surrounding the station. Station defense systems fired back, but they were designed for meteoroid protection, not warfare. The rebels were targeting communication arrays and docking bays. Director, another message from the rebel leader, called out a Moravi technician. Admiral Vrek's face appeared on the main screen. Crawl faces were always hard for humans to read, but this one seemed filled with hate. Director Zyktar, we demand your surrender. We also demand you hand over the human ambassador. He will answer for his species' crimes against the Crawl. What crimes? Greg stepped forward. Your people created a fake attack to blame humans. Vrek's 4 eyes narrowed. Humans have taken worlds that should belong to the Crawl. You pollute our culture with your ideas. The old Crawl ways are being forgotten because of species like yours. Greg understood now. This isn't about territory. You hate what the consular stands for. Different species working together. The strong should not need to work with the weak, Vrek said. The true Crawl will restore our place as rulers, not equals. The screen went dark as Vrek cut the connection. Their ships are moving to block all escape routes, Frank reported, checking the tactical displays. The Crawl ambassador entered the command center, surrounded by more guards. He looked defeated. Director, Ambassador Porter, I must confess, I knew nothing of this rebel plot, but I did push for harsher action against humans. I believe the territory disputes should be settled in our favor. You played into their hands, Greg said. They used your distrust of humans to set their plan in motion. A young human technician ran into the room. Sir, we've received a response from Earth. 3 human ships are on their way, but they're at least 6 hours out. We won't last 6 hours under this attack, Zyktar said grimly. Greg thought quickly. We need to expose the truth to everyone on the station and to all member species of the consular. If we can prove this was a setup, maybe other Crawl will turn against the rebels. The main communication system is damaged, Carol said, checking her device. But the internal station network is still working. And I might be able to bypass the damaged arrays to reach nearby systems, Ellie added. Do it, Greg ordered. Send everything we have about the fake attack. Show everyone how we've been manipulated against each other. While Ellie and Carol worked on the communications, the station defense became more desperate. The rebels had disabled 2 of the 4 docking bays. They were preparing to board the station. We need more time, Greg told Zyktar. My team needs at least 30 minutes to get the message out. The director looked at the Crawl ambassador. Can you contact any loyal Crawl ships nearby? I've been trying, the ambassador said, but the rebels are blocking our signals. Peter, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. What about the Gandari merchant ship? They have unusual communication technology. The rebels might not be able to block it. Good thinking, Greg said. Where are they docked? Bay 3, Peter replied. Still intact, but the rebels are moving that way. Greg turned to Frank. Take a security team and get to that ship. Ask them to send a distress call to any loyal Crawl forces. Frank nodded and left quickly with several guards. Zyktar approached Greg. Ambassador, I was wrong about humans. Your quick thinking may save us all. Save the apologies for later, Greg said. Right now, we need to stop those rebels from boarding. And I have an idea that might buy us some time. Greg gathered his team and the station security officers. The next 30 minutes would determine if the Galactic Consular survived, or if the peace between worlds would be shattered forever. Greg's plan was risky but simple. The station had emergency shuttles meant for evacuation. They weren't armed, but they could be used to distract the rebel ships. We'll launch 5 shuttles on autopilot, Greg explained to the group gathered in the command center. They'll fly erratic patterns around the station. The rebels will have to divert some of their attention to them. That might work, Zyktar agreed. It could give us the time we need. While station technicians prepared the shuttles, Carol approached Greg with news. Sir, Ellie has managed to restore partial communications. We can now broadcast to the station and nearby systems. Excellent, Greg said. Prepare all our evidence about the fake attack. I want to address everyone. In another part of the station, Frank had reached the Gandari ship. The alien merchants were nervous but agreed to help. Their ship had a unique communication system that used quantum entanglement, impossible for the rebels to block. We need you to contact any loyal Crawl ships, Frank explained to the Gandari captain. Tell them the consular station is under attack by rebels. The captain, a tall being with silvery skin, nodded. We will try, but our system has limited range. Meanwhile, the rebels had breached the outer defenses of Docking Bay 2. Station security forces engaged them in battle. The sounds of energy weapons echoed through nearby corridors. Back in the command center, Greg prepared to broadcast his message. He stood before a camera, feeling the weight of the moment. This might be their last chance to prevent a war between species. "Ready, sir," Carol said. Greg took a deep breath and began. To all members of the Galactic Consular and citizens of member worlds, I am Ambassador Greg Porter of Earth. Our station is under attack by a rebel Krall faction calling themselves the True Krall Alliance. These rebels staged a fake attack on a Krall transport ship using a vessel disguised as a human military ship. Their goal was to create conflict between humans and Krall, to weaken the consular from within. Greg continued, explaining the evidence they had found and showing the data that proved the attack was fake. He ended with a call for unity. This is not a conflict between humans and Krall. This is a conflict between those who believe in peace among different species and those who want to return to the darkness of isolation and hatred. I call on all loyal members of all species to stand together against this threat. As the message went out, the 5 emergency shuttles launched from different parts of the station. As Greg had predicted, several rebel ships broke off their attack to pursue these potential escapees. "It's working," Peter said, watching the tactical display. "They've reduced their attack on Docking Bay 3. Just then, Frank's voice came through on the communication system. "Command Center, this is Frank. The Gandari have made contact with a Krall military patrol. They're on their way, but they're still an hour out. We need to hold for an hour," Greg said to Zyktar. The director's scales had darkened with stress. "The rebels will realize those shuttles are empty soon. We need another distraction." A loud explosion rocked the station. The rebels had broken through at Docking Bay 2. Station security reported heavy fighting. "They're trying to reach the central control systems," a security officer reported. "If they take control of life support or artificial gravity, we're finished." Greg made another quick decision. "We need to seal off the sections between Bay 2 and the central systems. That means evacuating those areas." "There are still people there," Zyktor protested. "We'll give them 5 minutes to get out," Greg said. "Then we have to seal the bulkheads, even if everyone hasn't evacuated." It was a terrible choice, but they had no alternatives. Greg gave the evacuation order. Throughout the station, warning sirens blared as people fled from the targeted sections. As the 5-minute mark approached, Greg watched the security monitors. Most people had escaped, but a few were still making their way out. The rebels were advancing quickly. "Time's up," Frank said quietly, having returned to the command center. Greg looked at Zyktar. They both knew what had to be done. "Seal the bulkheads," Greg ordered, his voice heavy. The fate of the entire consular now depended on their ability to hold out until help arrived. Greg watched the monitors as the bulkheads sealed shut. The rebels were trapped in sections away from the critical systems, but the cost had been high. Not everyone had escaped in time. Some station staff were now trapped with the rebels. "We've bought some time," Zyktar said quietly, "but the rebels will find ways around the sealed areas." Greg nodded. "We need to prepare for when they break through." Reports came in from all over the station. Greg's broadcast had reached many nearby systems. Several had promised to send help, but like the loyal Krall forces, they were still far away. "Sir," Carol called from her console, "we're receiving responses from Krall worlds. Your message is causing debate. Many Krall citizens didn't know about the rebel faction." "That's good," Greg said. "If we can turn Krall public opinion against the rebels, they might lose support." The station shook as the rebel ships continued their attack from outside. Damage reports showed that life support systems were strained but holding. Power was failing in some sections. "We need a more permanent solution than just waiting for help," Frank said. "If those rebel ships destroy more critical systems, it won't matter if help arrives." Greg looked at the tactical displays showing the rebel ships. If we could disable their command ship, it might throw them into confusion. How? Asked Zyktar. We have no weapons that can reach them. Ellie, who had been working at a console, turned around. Actually, we might have something. The station's maintenance drones. They're designed to work on the station's exterior, but they could be reprogrammed. To do what? Greg asked. To attach themselves to the rebel ship's engines and disrupting their power systems. Ellie explained. They're small enough that the rebels might not notice them until it's too late. It was a desperate plan, but they had few options. Ellie began reprogramming the maintenance drones while the rest of the team continued to coordinate the station's defense. A security breach alarm sounded. The rebels had found another way in. They had cut through an exterior maintenance hatch in a section that wasn't properly sealed. They're entering near the medical bay, a security officer reported. Greg turned to Frank. Take a team and stop them. We can't lose the medical bay. There are injured people there. Frank nodded and left quickly with several guards. The situation was becoming more desperate by the minute. Peter, who had been monitoring communications, suddenly straightened. Ambassador, I'm picking up a new signal. It's coming from the rebel command ship. Put it through, Greg said. Admiral Vreck's voice filled the command center. Attention station personnel. Your position is hopeless. We have disabled most of your defenses. Surrender now, hand over the human ambassador, and we will spare the rest of you. Greg looked at Zyktar. He's lying. They want to eliminate all consular leadership. I know, the director replied. But some of the staff might believe him. We need to respond. Greg stepped forward. This is Ambassador Porter. We will not surrender. Your attack on this station has revealed your true intentions to all Krull worlds. Loyal Krull forces are on their way, along with ships from other consular members. Your rebellion has failed. There was a pause before Vreck responded, his voice filled with fury. Then you will all die. We will destroy the station rather than let it remain a symbol of weakness. The rebel ships began to move into a new attack formation, focusing their weapons on the station's power core. They're going to try to cause a catastrophic failure, Ellie said, looking at the sensor readings. If they hit the power core directly, the entire station will explode. How long until the drones are ready? Greg asked. 5 more minutes, Ellie replied, working furiously. Greg knew they might not have 5 minutes. He turned to Zyktar. We need to evacuate as many people as possible to the central hub. If the power core is breached, it's the only section that might survive. As evacuation orders went out, Greg felt a cold fury growing inside him. The rebels were willing to destroy everything the consular stood for, to kill thousands of innocent people, all because they couldn't accept a universe where different species lived together as equals. They will not succeed, Greg said, his voice hard with determination. Not while I still have breath in my body. Ellie's maintenance drones were ready. 20 small machines, normally used to repair the station's exterior, now had new programming. Greg watched on the monitors as they launched from various airlocks, small enough to avoid immediate detection by the rebel ships. They're approaching the rebel vessels, Ellie reported. 10 seconds until contact. Everyone in the command center held their breath. The drones attached themselves to engine sections of the rebel ships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, rebel ships began to drift out of formation as their power systems failed. It's working, Peter exclaimed. The rebel command ship was the last to be affected. Just before its engines failed, it fired a powerful blast at the station. The entire structure shook violently. Warning alarms blared. Direct hit to the outer section of the power core, a technician called out. Containment is holding, but barely. The rebels are hailing us, Carol said. Admiral Vreck's face appeared on screen, illuminated by red emergency lighting on his own ship. This is not over, human. You have disabled our ships temporarily, but we have crippled your station. Neither of us will leave this place alive. Before Greg could respond, another voice broke in on the communication system. This is Captain Cracks of the Crawl Defense Force. Rebel ships, power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Through the station's viewports, they could see new ships arriving. Official Crawl military vessels. They had arrived earlier than expected. The Gandari communications worked, Frank said, returning to the command center. He looked tired but uninjured. The loyal Crawl forces received our message and pushed their engines to the limit to get here faster. The rebel ships, powerless to resist, were quickly surrounded. On the station, rebel forces found themselves trapped between sealed bulkheads and station security teams. Many surrendered when they heard that official Crawl forces had arrived. Admiral Vrek made one last transmission from his command ship. You may have won today, human, but the true Crawl will rise again. Many share our beliefs that species should not mix. This peace you cherish cannot last. Greg stepped forward to respond, his voice firm. You're wrong. Admiral, what happened here today proves that peace can last. When you tried to turn humans and Crawl against each other, both our people saw through your deception. When you attacked this station, beings from 17 different worlds worked together to defend it. Hours later, with the rebel forces contained and repairs to the station underway, Greg stood in the main council chamber. Representatives from all species had gathered for an emergency session. Director Zektar called for attention. Today, we faced a threat not from outside the consular, but from within. Those who wished to destroy our unity almost succeeded. They exploited our differences, our suspicions of each other. The director turned to look at Greg. But thanks to Ambassador Porter and his team, their plan failed. The human ambassador showed us that our strength lies in working together, despite our differences. The chamber erupted in applause. Even the Crawl ambassador joined in. When the noise died down, Greg stepped forward to speak. What happened here must never be forgotten. The rebels almost succeeded because we were too ready to believe the worst about each other. From now on, we must work harder to understand our differences and focus on what unites us. 1 month later, Greg stood in his office, looking out at the stars. The station had been repaired. A new treaty had been signed between humans and Crawl, resolving their territorial disputes. The Crawl government had arrested hundreds of rebel sympathizers. A message arrived from Earth. Greg had been promoted and would now lead a new consular initiative to improve understanding between member species. His first task would be to visit each homeworld and learn about their cultures firsthand. As he packed his belongings, Greg smiled. The peace had almost been shattered, but instead, it had been made stronger. His fury at the injustice had not led to vengeance, but to better understanding. That, he believed, was true diplomacy, responding to hatred not with more hatred, but with a determination to build something better. In the vastness of space, the Galactic Consular Station continued its orbit, a beacon of cooperation among the stars.